I could feel very high.
It's a new day, but not on the Enterprise, at least not yet. We're on a Ferengi ship, not that we humans will know that particular name for a while, and it looks like they're paying us a visit. Ferengi Clint Howard and Ferengi Jeffrey Combs are the pair nominated to pop over. Perhaps the breathing equipment is because they're not sure about our atmosphere, or perhaps it's connected to all of the crew lying around unconscious. That latter point may be due to the unusual gizmo sitting in engineering and pissing out smoke. The visitors certainly seem familiar with it, and Ferengi Clint Howard closes it, while Ferengi Jeffrey Combs pokes T'Pol's ears. They take off the masks on the way to the bridge and give Ferengi Ethan Phillips, who appears to be in charge, a call to update him. All of this is unbeknownst to Tucker, who wakes up in the Berman chamber. A lack of response from Phlox causes him to fiddle the door open, potentially putting the whole crew at risk by ignoring decontamination procedures. It's lucky he has the standard Starfleet approach to rules, as he finds Phlox unconscious. The arrival of Ferengi Clint Howard and Ferengi Jeffrey Combs forces him to hide, and the pair loot sickbay. They're joined on the Enterprise by Ferengi Ethan Phillips and Ferengi Matt Malloy, who's the only Star Trek newcomer. The group systematically nick everything of worth, which obviously includes all of the females. Tucker makes it to engineering and starts observing events through internal cameras. The first thing he sees is Archer being carried away. The group chain him up in the launch bay with all the other goodies and then wake him. Some fiddling with their translators and a bonk from Ferengi Clint Howard lets Archer know this is not a friendly visit. In short, they want the cash. Ferengi Ethan Phillips is convinced we have a vault like what normal people do, and he wants the contents. Archer tries to convince him we don't have one, and manages to spot Tucker as Ferengi Jeffrey Combs tells Ferengi Ethan Phillips they should bugger off with what they've already got, including the females. When Ferengi Ethan Phillips sees Archer take issue with the idea of them becoming slaves, he leans into it for effect. It works, and Archer agrees to show them the vault, but he's smart enough to play to his audience and demand half of the contents. Unfortunately, he plays it a little too well, and some hard bargaining has Ferengi Ethan Phillips decide they'll find it themselves. Ferengi Jeffrey Combs is left with a gun and Archer, and the latter is ordered to start loading the loot. Being left alone with Ferengi Jeffrey Combs gives Archer a chance to work on him. Some accidentally on purpose misunderstandings point out that he's getting screwed by the other three. Exploitation is fair game as far as Ferengi Jeffrey Combs is concerned, even when you're on the receiving end, and Ferengi Ethan Phillips, who's his cousin, has promised to help him get his own ship in the nebulously undefined future. Archer asks for a drink and Ferengi Jeffrey Combs trots off to sort it, leaving Tucker, who was following, to nip in for a chat. A rescue is out of the question, sadly. All of the guns have been nicked, as well as anything from sickbay that could have woken the crew. Archer tells him about the spray they used to wake him, so Tucker scarpers to find it as Ferengi Jeffrey Combs returns. The first person Tucker doses up is T'Pol, who's understandably a touch confused at being woken to find him in his undercrackers. We learn he was in the Berman chamber because he visited a moon to survey it, which is where he found the gizmo that was pissing out smoke earlier. It would appear the Ferengi were using it as bait and weapon in one. They're forced to pause the conversation when Archer and Ferengi Jeffrey Combs come in briefly, the latter expressing a personal interest in T'Pol, but continue once alone again. The spray's out of juice, so waking anyone else is no longer an option, but at least Tucker's got help now, and after a quick diversion, also some clothes. Things aren't going so well for the other three Ferengi and their search for a non-existent vault. T'Pol's watching them fail, and the lack of a positive result is starting to create fractures. Ferengi Clint Howard in particular is pissed off and has decided he's keeping whatever he finds now. While Tucker's setting a giant lock in a conduit, something that looks big and important, Ferengi Matt Malloy has decided to check the map for our vault. It's not as daft as it sounds, as he reasons the vault might be in the captain's quarters. T'Pol's working on a tablet while they talk and starts a high-pitched noise on a bridge console. As they investigate the distraction, she sneaks in and moves some of the loot that Ferengi Clint Howard had claimed. Pooping yellow at a console stops the noise, but Ferengi Clint Howard notices he's now missing 3 of his ill-gotten gains. More fiddling from T'Pol makes a gizmo beep, which is a problem for Ferengi Ethan Phillips because she put 2 of them in his bag. A claim that he didn't steal them is obviously not very convincing while they're all in the middle of a burglary, nor is Ferengi Matt Malloy's assurance that he doesn't know where the 3rd is. If the plan was to sow discord, it's working very well indeed. Archer's trying to convince Ferengi Jeffrey Combs to double-cross his mates. He declines, but only after giving it a good thinking over, and he doesn't look entirely sure he's made the right choice. Ferengi Matt Malloy is trying to make Porthos, dog in space, tell them where the vault is. Ferengi Clint Howard can see there's no point, but thinks the dog might be worth a few quid, so nabs him. As he's turning Porthos, dog in space, into Porthos, dog in box, he spots Tucker doing a bad job of hiding behind a crate. Well, collapsible industrial bulk container actually, but we already had this discussion in the DS9 episode Paradise. It's a different model, by the way. Regardless, Ferengi Clint Howard gives chase and lets the others know there's somebody awake. Tucker pretending to be unconscious in the mess hall is enough to get him into wrestling range and knock him out, only to have Ferengi Ethan Phillips scupper the victory with a taser whip. Archer still loading the loot and needling Ferengi Jeffrey Combs about being more assertive when the others arrive with Tucker. Archer feigns ignorance at why Tucker's awake, which causes Ferengi Matt Malloy to conclude they should leg it because they might have got the knockout gas dosage wrong. Ferengi Ethan Phillips is going all in on the vault now, and he draws his weapon when Ferengi Clint Howard tries to disagree. An offer to let Ferengi Clint Howard leave with one of our shuttles and all of the females causes Tucker to intervene and offer to show them the vault. He spins a yarn about Hoshi being his wife, and Archer trying to give him gold in exchange for his loss results in a bit of a wrestle. This is enough to convince Ferengi Ethan Phillips, and he takes Tucker up on his offer. Nobody trusts anybody by this point, so they all want to go, including Ferengi Jeffrey Combs. He tries to force the point, only to immediately back down when he meets resistance. Archer pretending he's injured himself also means Ferengi Jeffrey Combs needs to do the rest of the lifting too. As Ferengi Ethan Phillips and company are led a merry chase by Tucker, Ferengi Jeffrey Combs is finding T'Pol conscious. She asks if he's here to save her, pretending that we humans kidnapped her, and shows how appreciative she can be when prompted. It gets her close enough to give him a Vulcan neck massage, then she nicks his key and grabs a gun. Tucker's hike has gone on for some time when the group starts becoming suspicious. They eventually arrive at the fancy lock he installed earlier, and the 3 all insist on entering together. The other side does not have the promised valuables, but it does have T'Pol with a pistol. A bit of pooping red from her solves our piracy problem. The Ferengi are putting everything back again, with no small amount of persuasion from our now conscious security, and Porthos dog in box becomes Porthos dog in arms. In short, everything goes back to normal. For us, anyway. Archer tells our unwanted visitors that he'll warn both Starfleet and the Vulcans about them, but he's also letting them go. There's been a slight change of leadership, though, as Ferengi Jeffrey Combs is the only one not tied up. The others move on to bribes when threats don't work, so we'll leave Ferengi Jeffrey Combs to see how much profit he can extract from them as we get ready to take another step on the long road. Lock up your valuables, folks. Star Trek's hyper-capitalists are back. The concept of the Ferengi comedy episode makes an unexpected return, even more so for it being a few hundred years before we're supposed to officially meet the bastards. The inclusion of the Ferengi in Enterprise apparently caused a few ruffled feathers among some fans back in the day for just this reason, namely that the large-lobed Latinum lovers were supposed to be an unknown quantity until a certain Johnny Picard bumps into them in the 2360s. We know this to be nonsense, of course, as they first visited Earth in 1947 due to time fuckery, and Quark was throwing around the word Ferengi as though it was a casual greeting. But even if that wasn't the case, I can't say I'd personally have a problem with them being here in principle. The idea that once we've met a species we're supposed to instantly know all about them is nonsense, and it's perfectly reasonable to come across people we won't meet again for a few centuries and not make the connection. As to some fans citing the spatial logistics of it all, that's a non-starter. Is it true the Ferengi should be so far away as to not be encountered? Yes, it is. Does that matter a single jot? No, it does not. Treks never particularly cared about the concept of distances between species before, something regularly shown in Deep Space Nine by us taking jaunts to Earth, Ferengi, Kronos, and wherever else we fancy without any real concern for timescales. The idea that we should start giving a shit now just because viewers don't like the premise of today's story is a glaring double standard. The observant among you may have noticed that I said I had no issue with the Ferengi being here, in principle, and that qualifying supplemental is there for a reason. The Ferengi making an appearance in Enterprise is one thing, Archer knowing exactly how to deal with them based on a minute of dialogue is quite another. He goes from completely clueless to bargaining bastard in seconds, tying into the core attribute of a species that we viewers know perfectly well, but his only experience has been on the receiving end of a minute of piracy. If the Ferengi had been replaced by, say, the Orion Syndicate, who'd performed exactly the same actions, would switching into bargaining over lives have felt like the logical conclusion? Would the plan still have been one of outwitting them with tongue firmly in cheek? I'm not convinced. All of which is to say that if you're going to have a Ferengi comedy episode in a prequel, you can't just copy the format from 200 years into the future and expect the context to remain unchanged. If you wanted to be particularly ungenerous, you could say it's not just the approach that's uninspired. I think there's a fair argument to be made for the characters we're given being largely based on those we've seen before. Ferengi Jeffrey Combs is Rom, the underappreciated brother, before his renaissance. Ferengi Clint Howard is Lek the mercenary with his taste for violence. Ferengi Ethan Phillips is Gala the arms dealer, shrewd and unscrupulous. They even nicked the bit about him being a cousin. As to Ferengi Matt Malloy, he's basically any Ferengi that didn't get fleshed out with a character, one of the bartenders, for example. If you'd pasted the actors we know from DS9 into these roles and said, play it like you already do, I'm not convinced the end result would have been much different. Tangentially, Ferengi characters may not be the only thing borrowed from Deep Space Nine if my eyes aren't playing tricks on me. The airlock of the Ferengi ship looks suspiciously like a repurposed docking port from a certain space station. To be fair, this at least has had a decent amount of effort applied to make it look like they're not simply copying homework. It's also far easier to excuse when a new set costs a lot more money than a new idea. And this all leads me to somewhat of a quandary, because I don't actively dislike the episode. It's not bad, it's just, I don't know, tired, maybe? Brannon Braga referred to using the Ferengi as an act of desperation. Whilst I don't think that necessarily had to be true in all circumstances, I'd agree the end result certainly isn't Enterprise trying to stand on its own feet. The deliberate inclusion of so many previous Trek alumni certainly doesn't help this feeling. But then, despite all of this, despite my criticisms, is it really fair to condemn the episode purely for trying to capitalize on what came before? How is this any different from slapping a pool cue episode into the first season of Deep Space Nine? I took a fairly big shit on that story during our review, but not for the simple fact it had a callback in it. So does Enterprise being a prequel mean it should receive far less leniency for acknowledging large swathes of the existing universe? And if so, wasn't the entire premise doomed no matter who was in charge of the thing? How can anybody take a long-running and storied franchise and make something just as successful while stripping away what came before? Berman and Braga may have gone to significant lengths in stressing just how different they intended to make Enterprise, but that doesn't stop me from feeling vaguely unreasonable if I don't judge it by the same standards as its contemporaries. Maybe that's appropriate, though. Maybe my sense of unease at just how I'm supposed to judge the interactions of past futures and future pasts is a good representation of how things were going behind the scenes. Having a showrunner of all people refer to a story in the first season as desperate certainly isn't a sign of confidence. In that respect, perhaps Acquisition is one of the most important episodes of the season. Just like me trying to reconcile conflicting opinions into one conclusion, maybe it serves as an insight into a show being pulled in two different directions at once and struggling to reach a single destination as a result. End of episode.
Good news, I've solved the crew problem.
Nice one. What's the solution then?
I've snagged the knockout gas they used in this episode. Phlox has agreed to use it instead of his hallucinogen goop.
No, what an handy coincidence. Anybody would think it were planned.
Anybody who doesn't personally know the guy who makes these.
Incompetent git. He didn't even bother with an episode last Friday.
I'm reliably informed he was fluidly unwell in 2 different ways, and the acoustics of your average bathroom don't lend themselves to recording.
Yeah, we got it sorted now, and that's what matters. Did you recognize the Ferengi?
3 of them, yes, and the boss lad was being played by none other than Neelix himself.
That must be why they ransacked the mess hall. It's the first time the poor buggers have had real food. Oh.